Hello, fourth graders! Today we're going to be learning about the Great Depression in the United States. We'll focus on what is the Great Depression, what caused it. We'll focus on President Herbert Hoover and his Hoover bills, and on President Franklin Roosevelt and his New Deal. Let's start. The Great Depression starts in October 1929 and ends in 1939, lasting about 10 years. This happens when the stock market crashed. You might ask yourself, what is the stock market? Well, the stock market is where people buy and sell stocks, and a stock is a piece of a company that you own. During the Great Depression, there wasn't any of investors, which led to many industries to lay off their workers, which means that over 15 million people lost their jobs, and there was no money in the banks. That's not all. Remember what happened during the roaring 1920s? America went through a period of wealth. The economy expanded rapidly. Americans were buying more stocks than before. They were spending money on things they didn't need. For example, cars, radios, electric vacuum cleaners, cosmetics, and more. The Great Depression affected everyone in the United States, both urban and rural families. In industrialized cities, the industrial production had dropped by half, and unemployment was rising rapidly. It was not only millionaires who had invested their money into the stock market, this also included cooks and janitors. The stock market crash left people with nothing. Consumer spending was at its lowest point in comparison to the excessive spending of the roaring 1920s. This caused wages to be low and others to be unemployed. Homelessness was common during those years. Farmers were forced to leave their crops behind because they had no money to maintain it. People traveled around in Hoovervilles. What are those? You might be asking yourself. Hoovervilles are homes made out of cardboard shacks, lumber, glass, or anything they can find. Many people wander around the cities looking for jobs or waiting in long lines to get some soup and bread. Hoovervilles were also built around water sources like lakes or rivers. Some Hoovervilles had furniture, some didn't. One thing that all Hoovervilles shared were the unsanitary conditions that people faced in those places they called home. Hoovervilles were named after President Hoover Hoover because his government failed to provide relief for the American people. Hoover and the government were blamed for the intolerable conditions that Americans faced during this time. President Herbert Hoover served the country from March 4, 1929 to March 4, 1933. President Hoover was a believer of self-reliance. What does that mean? This means that if you have a problem, you have to solve it yourself. No one's going to be there to give you a helping hand.